1963, a year you may be too young to remember, but the force of what happened 61 years ago today is still very much a part of our lives. Just as the country feels diametrically divided over politics today, in the 1960s, skin color was the dividing line. If these pictures could speak.
Civil rights was a war for the families and the people involved.
They would tell a story of a Sunday.
I'll never forget that night.
When a church memorial service was overshadowed by brute police force, and the president of the local NAACP was beaten.
I do remember Mom saying they were pulling him, trying to get him out of the church, and somebody was holding Dad's other arm, trying to keep him in the church.
KTBS 3 was there that day. It was September 22nd, 1963, a Sunday, a day still considered the most racially divided day of the week. A.G. and C.E. McLean's father was pastor of Little Union Baptist Church. A.G. recalls the plan to march in honor of the 4 young girls killed 1 week earlier in the Birmingham church bombing.
Commissioner Dodd as Public Service Commissioner for a permit to march from corner of Kenneth Avenue and Milam straight to the church past Booker T.
When the request was denied, leaders planned instead for a memorial service inside Little Union Baptist Church.
Most of the NAACP meetings were held here at our church because the other pastors were afraid to have them at their churches.
The memorial service crowd swelled beyond what the church could hold.
And it was packed house. I was sitting about third or fourth pew. At that time we had theater seats.
Maxine Sarpy was new to Shreveport. Her husband's medical office was next door to the church.
We had gone to the service that evening, my husband and I, and had sat with Ann Brewster. And after the service, we left and went to the house.
They all recall what happened next.
It was so chaotic, so much going on. You know, people were screaming and hollering, and they were in fear of their lives.
And they were throwing folks up in the trash truck, and people were still running because the police were on the horses.
Years later, Blake would describe what happened that night to C.E. McLean.
He was really taken by surprise, looking one way, and then they cuffed him in the back of his suit jacket and pulled him out.
Blake was dragged out of the church, down the stairs. He was surrounded by a mob of angry police officers. He was beaten right here, just outside of the front door of the church. Dr. Joseph Sarpy, Jr. and his wife Maxine were telephoned to return to the church.
There were 3 major macerations in his head, and so it was blood going everywhere.
And he looked like a purple rag, as old preacher would say, just drenched, drenched in blood.
And so immediately my husband had to get busy and start trying to take over his physical condition at that point.
They couldn't take him to a hospital.
And they said, "Oh no, Doc, you can't take him to the hospital because they go in the hospital and get him out."
The family went to Dallas and stayed on the campus of Bishop College, now Paul Quinn.
And my sister does remember being on the campus. I think they stayed maybe a month before coming back to Shreveport.
By the time Blake returned, the sanctuary had been restored. Twins Rosa Robertson and Ruther Washington were just 12 years old.
We had to help my dad clean up, which is what the horses left. So.
But the cry for equality echoed 9 more months. When I interviewed Reverend Blake in 2018, he showed me the scar the beating left behind. But it's the mark he left after the beating that speaks louder than hatred.
So he really left an indelible mark on the community. You can't really talk about Allendale and not see the improvements that he tried to make.
61 years have passed since the unmerciful beating of Reverend Harry Blake. There's an historic marker on Milam Street that describes a Sunday never to be forgotten. Blake died in 2020 after a COVID diagnosis. The city of Shreveport formally apologized in 2022. The struggle he nearly died for now rests in the hands of today's generation.
We could have been taught so different and just been bitter adults now. But our family was always with a air of forgiveness about us. God always balances the books, as Dad would say.
Brenda Teal, KTBS 3 News.